Hey guys, welcome to WonderMom's workshop. I am waiting for my bread to rise, so I thought I would show you how I make granola bars. This is a recipe that I'm asked for quite a bit, and they're super delicious. They're really chewy and they're shelf stable, and if I let my kids unchecked, they will gobble them all in a day. So what you're gonna need for this is a large mixing bowl and a medium saucepan. And I do all of this on the stove top. It's a no-bake recipe and it's just super simple and really easy. So I'm gonna start with Rice Krispies. We're going to, and you know, when it comes to Rice Krispies, I don't usually use any substitutes. Like the original Rice Krispie, something about it is like just perfect for baking anything. And that is what one of the ingredients we're gonna use for our granola bars. So we'll do 4 cups of Rice Krispies. I'm gonna dump them in my large mixing bowl. Okay, on top of that, I will use 3 cups of oats. The original recipe where I got this called for 4 cups of oats, but I found that it just kind of made my recipe too dry. So I reduced it to 3, and that is just about right. Also, I like to put them on top, and that helps the mixture that I'm gonna make on the stove, it just helps cook the oats a little bit more efficiently. So I'm gonna set this aside. Today we're gonna make peanut butter chocolate chip granola bars. Sometimes I like to make almond butter and craisin. So if you use a dried fruit, then you would dump the dried fruit into this mixture as well. But because we're doing chocolate chip, I add that last so that our chocolate chips don't get too melty. Okay, now onto the stove top. Now we're gonna measure 1 cup of 3 ingredients. Okay, our first ingredient for 1 cup is going to be light corn syrup. And as always, I buy in bulk. All right, so I'm gonna dump it in my measuring cup. All right, and I'm going to scrape it out into my saucepan. Okay, and I'll turn the oven on. I like to cook things quickly, and this one doesn't burn very much, so I'm gonna put it on to high. All right. The next thing we're going to mix in is brown sugar. Okay, so I'm going to measure out 1 cup of brown sugar. And I've got my kids helping me right now. Okay, so 1 cup of brown sugar is going to go with that corn syrup. All right, we're gonna heat this up over the stove top. Just, hey, hands off. I know, but you need to go read your book.
I don't want to.
Of course not. All right, so I'm going to mix the brown sugar and the corn syrup together over medium to high heat. The sugar is going to dissolve into the corn syrup, and it's going to become like a transparent mixture. Right now it's just kind of chunky and brown, but as I keep stirring and warming it up, it's going to melt that. As I wait for that to go down, I'm going to measure out 1 cup of peanut butter. You can use any kind of peanut butter. If you want a really chewy, soft consistency, Jif or Skippy, one of those brands works really, really well. I've started switching to fresh ground peanut butter just because with as much sugar as we have in it, it's nice to be able to reduce the sugar in some places. And store-bought, or I guess commercially made peanut butter has a lot of sugar in it. So I like to use the fresh ground stuff. I get it from Winco, and it's amazing and the price is comparable and it just helps reduce the sugar a little bit. So I measure out 1 cup of peanut butter.
I'm not playing a game. You like peanut.
It is a little bit thicker, but once the mixture in the saucepan comes to a boil, like that heat will help soften it and melt the peanut butter down so it's easier to use. Yeah, so I'm just gonna cram it into my measuring cup. Make sure I have a full cup. Okay. All right. So there we go. I've got a cup of peanut butter ready to go. I'm gonna stir my corn syrup and brown sugar mixture. and it's just about starting to bubble and boil. We don't want to bubble and boil it too much. We don't want to burn our sugar. So we want to keep a close eye. So when the sugar is pretty much dissolved into the corn syrup and it's a nice smooth consistency and it starts to bubble, then I will turn off the heat. It's as hot as it needs to get. And scoop out. Now I'm using Pampered Chef. Seriously, silicone scrapers are the best. And they're really strong. If you don't have one of these, I recommend using a wooden spoon because any other rubber scraper is just not as strong as these ones are. So it's my little spoonula. I guess that's the technical term. Anyway, so I'm gonna mash up the peanut butter. And, you know, right now it's pretty chunky and gross, but I'm just gonna warm it up and smash it in until it's a nice, smooth consistency. As it starts to get a little bit smoother, I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. Now here's a little secret. Anytime I use vanilla, I don't really measure it because if you go overboard on vanilla, it's gonna taste amazing. So I just kind of eyeball it. But because vanilla is made with alcohol, it's extremely flammable and you don't want to put it in while the stove is on. So as I dump it in, it's going to bubble up just a little bit. Okay, but I stir it in and that's going to help get that smooth consistency that we want. All right, so we're almost there. And again, if you use like a commercially made peanut butter, this process is going to take less time. It's going to smooth out a lot faster, actually. So you can use whatever you want. All right, it is pretty much smooth and kind of drizzly. Okay, so I'm ready to mix that into my Rice Krispie and oat mixture. And I'm going to pour it right on top. Okay, scrape my pot and get it in there. Now this is what I meant when I said before about the warm ingredients, cooking the oats, so we don't end up with dry oats. They go right on top and start to cook those down. Okay, so I've got it mixed right there on top, and I'm just going to start stirring it all up and mixing all of the ingredients. Now this is a really, really sticky mixture. Okay, so to help with the stickiness, some tricks I like to use, and I didn't do it this time, but I like to butter my spatula, and that helps the ingredients just come free of my spatula a lot easier. And I also like to grease my bowl, and that way things don't stick, and I'm able to get everything out of my bowl. All right. So I've mixed up my mixture. All of the wet ingredients are incorporated really well into my dry ingredients. And while it's still warm, I'm going to take a 15 by 11 cookie sheet, a really large one, greased, and I'm going to dump the whole mound of this mixture into the pan. All right. So if you're making like a raisin or a craisin variety, then everything is just going to go right in and it's going to get nice and smashed up and it's just going to be lovely. But because we're working with chocolate chips and chocolate chips tend to melt, we are going to add the chocolate chips at this point. Okay, so I'm scraping the bowl really well, as good as I can. And I'm going to start just spreading the mixture throughout the pan. And I don't want to make it too flat right now because I'm going to add the chocolate chips so that they're more evenly distributed across the pan before I really press them in. Okay, so I'm kind of chopping it up, making some space, right? And then I like to use the mini semi-sweet chocolate chips. And honestly, I just take a handful or two and I sprinkle them over this mixture. Some of them are going to hit the bottom of the pan, which means they're going to be on the underside of the granola bars, which is great. And the rest of them are going to be on top. So I just evenly sprinkle those throughout. And then I continue pressing it into the pan as flat as I can get. And I want to make sure that there's no holes or gaps. All right, so it takes a lot of arm work to really mash it in, so I use a little trick to help myself. Wax paper, I just pull out a strip long enough to cover my bars, and I grab a rolling pin and I just, you know, provided that my pan doesn't slide around, I just roll out and really use that rolling pin to press the whole mixture into my pan. Sometimes I have to put my pan on something so that it doesn't slip around, but I really want to dig the rolling pin into the edges so that the mixture doesn't like come up the side of the pan and make a wonky edge. And I make sure that all of my edges are pressed in. If my wax paper slides around a little bit, I just shift it so that I can get where I need to be. All right. Now, because the mixture is still warm, at this point you will notice that some of the chocolate or the chocolate chips is sticking to the wax paper, and that's totally fine. Now we can do this one of a couple ways. We can either remove the wax paper. Okay, here's my little granola bars. Or, waiting for them to cool, you can just leave the wax paper on, and that way some of that chocolate will stick into the mixture. All right, so our granola bars are cool and ready to cut. Got them in the pan here. The chocolate chips get a little bit mushy with the wax paper, but it's totally good. It's chocolate, right? So how I do this, I take a large knife, and to avoid any sticking, I like to just butter both sides of my knife. Okay, and that just helps prevent it from sticking, and it doesn't affect the flavor much. So I just go right down halfway. First I divide it in half here. See the line? Ta-da! All right, and then I do long quarters. So this is just how I divide. You can divide it up however you see fit. But I find that dividing it in half and then in half again just allows me to have a more consistent shape. So there's my quarters, and then I'm gonna turn it the other way. Divide it in half, long ways. All right, and then into quarters. That same long ways. And I just push that knife right through. And with the butter, you see not a lot of the granola bar is sticking. Okay, and then I continue going that way, and I divide it into eighths. And they are just the right size for a good snack. They're nice and long and narrow. Okay, so we've got our eighths here. I'll show you how that pan looks. All right, so we've got it divided 32 ways, and it's just dividing it in half, and then in half again, and then in half again. All right, just grab a spatula and tuck it under. You've got, that's the size of your bar. Okay, if you want to divide it in half, again, you absolutely can, but see, this is nice and soft and chewy, and the kids love it. So you can package it any way you want to. Like I mentioned before, these are shelf stable. So I just take a gallon-sized Ziploc bag, and I take my spatula and I get it under, I can fit about six long, if I can show you this. So I go 6 that way, you see? Okay, and then I have enough room to do another row of 6 there. And then I put just a small sheet of wax paper on top of that and add another thing. They're narrow enough that I stack them about three deep. You can store them also in snack size bags or in a Tupperware container. And then I just throw them in the pantry. They don't last long because the kids like them so much that they just gobble them down. But when they don't know they're there, they last for a long time, and they don't go bad. And they're really soft and delicious, and a wonderful snack to take on the go. So there you have it. I hope you give this a try. I hope you love the flavor. Let me know how your experience is. And also, I like to experiment with my recipes, especially ones that are just so simple and basic. But if you have other combinations that you want to try, if you want to try a different nut butter or a different dried fruit to put into it, or any other things that you want to add, let me know what you do. I'd love to experiment and grab some ideas from you as well. So good luck, and I hope you like this recipe.